Welcome to A Shock in the Dark, an audio journal of a haunting. Everything you are about to hear is nonfiction. Each audio recording was conducted in real time, on the dates indicated, and is affirmed by affidavit to represent the complete and truthful experience of the narrator. In order to maintain continuity and ensure a complete understanding of the events, it's strongly recommended that you start at the beginning and listen in chronological order.
Today is Friday, April 2nd, payday. That's nice. Hello, whoever you are. I decided gonna make a few recordings. Kind of like an audio journal, I guess, because of stuff that's been going on recently. I'll explain all that in a minute. I would write it down. In fact, that's what I started to do, but as it turns out, I am not good at writing. So I gave up after about the first sentence. So I want to record all this stuff while it's still fresh in my mind. And by stuff, I mean some very, very strange, disturbing stuff that's recently been happening, which has brought up a whole bunch of emotions and memories of things that happened when I was a kid. In a best case scenario, I guess this recording will remind me of various details I may lose over time. In a worst case, I guess people will know what happened to me when they find my lifeless body in my apartment. I'm kidding, of course. I don't expect anything like that to happen, but I have to say, recently, there are moments where it definitely feels like I'm gonna die. And I don't know, lately there's been some moments where I truly and honestly, I'm questioning my sanity. And things have been pretty creepy lately, pretty weird. Not quite, Amityville horror weird, but, definitely weird. And it's definitely been disturbing. Look, if you know me, I don't know who you are. I don't know if anybody's ever going to listen to this, but if you know me, you know I'm not one of those alien ghost Bigfoot people. I mean, I think all that stuff's fun and all, but I take sort of a agnostic approach to paranormal stuff. I don't know what all the answers are. I have no idea what's going on out there. All I can do is tell you my own personal experience and to bring you up to date with what's happening. And before I say anything else, keep this in mind. Everything I say here this is my journal. This is just true. These are my true experiences. I don't really know what I'm going to do with this, so I will probably change some names because I don't want to drag anybody else into my insanity. And all things being equal, that is the most likely answer. Maybe I've just finally lost my mind. Maybe this is a journal of someone on the brink of cracking. Maybe that'll be the name of the book, On the Brink of Cracking. But, and by the way, me going crazy, that does make the most sense, but this to me is as real as anything else in the world. It's as real as, this table here. I don't feel like I'm having a psychotic break, but I guess people who are having a psychotic break don't feel like they are. But time will tell, and I guess you'll be the judge of all that. Anyway, no matter what this thing is, it should be an interesting journey. That's all I know. Okay, before I tell you what's been happening here, I've got to go back into time a little bit to when I was a kid. I'm not going to go into my whole life story or anything, don't worry. But it is important that I fill you in on some background information and generally describe what has led me to this point. And I feel like I have to tell you what has led me to make these recordings. So, if you're going to judge me, you should have all the information. So, I grew up in the backwoods of southern Alabama, and I lived there near a bayou with my brother, Cajun country. I lived there with my brother, my mom, and my dad, and later on, when I was around 10, my little sister would come along. But back at this particular time that I'm talking about, it was just the four of us living in the house that my dad and my grandfather built by hand from scratch. This house was built in the dead center of where an old railroad track used to be. The railroad track itself is long gone. Before I was born, that was gone. But when it was there, it would take, people and materials between the bayou and the big city. And you could actually see on the property and where the house was, where the track used to be, by the way the earth was built up by about a 5-foot wide path or something that was raised a little higher than the surrounding ground. My grandfather also used to tell us that there was an old Indian trail that ran right across where our house was located. I don't know if that's true, but I assume it is, since my grandfather was one of the most honest and ethical people I've ever met or known of. Now, there was a lot of forest around our house. I mean, just acres and acres, miles of forest, but as much time as I spent exploring the forest, that was just all around our house. I can tell you that there were plenty of old burial mounds in those woods. But, lest you think this is some kind of poltergeist movie story, we were always taught better than to dig in an Indian burial mound. We were taught to respect those places just as we would respect our own family cemetery. So we just never messed with those burial mounds, ever, for any reason. But still, more than a few odd things happened in that house. The most frightening thing was something that was recurring. In fact, it happened every single night for what was probably, a year? 2 years? I was around 6 or 7, something like that. And I know that this will sound completely insane, but all I can do is tell you honestly and straight up what happened to me. So, I'm 6 or 7 in that house my dad and grandfather built, and every night after bedtime, I would have visitors. And I called these nightly visitors the Black Outline People. These were full-sized adult human-looking beings, but there was absolutely no features, no faces, no outlines of clothing, no outlines of hair. It was just these black human-shaped silhouettes that would creep out of the walls of my bedroom at night. Imagine mannequins that are completely blacked out, silhouettes, but they're walking around. And keep in mind, this happened every night. Basically, the routine would be this. About an hour or so after everybody went to bed, I would usually see the first sign. Usually, it would start with seeing one of these silhouette people slowly leaning their head in from the hallway, peeking in to the bedroom from the door, like it was seeing if the coast was clear or something. Then they would come out. These dark silhouette beings, darker than my own dark room, would walk out of the walls. And it would be anywhere from just 3 or 4 of them, all the way up to giant crowds of them. And it seemed like each one of them had a different job or something. Because some of them would just mill about and inspecting things in the room. Some would, as soon as they came out of the wall, immediately go to other places outside the room. They'd go, out through the door, or maybe even through the opposing wall. And sometimes they would stand right beside my bed. And periodically, one of them might lean over so that their faces were within inches of my face. At the time, I thought they were, kind of trying to tell if I was asleep or not. But really, I had no idea what was happening. I mean, no idea. I wasn't really thinking that deep into it either. I was just too busy being traumatized. I was too busy being in abject terror. But basically, I would have 2 bad choices. I could keep my eyes on them so I'd know where they are and what they're doing, or I could hide. And I usually chose to hide. I put my head under the covers and I just lay there stiff as a board for fear of moving and the fear of them knowing I was awake. And the lack of fresh air under the blanket would cause me to hyperventilate and sweat like I was breaking a fever, and I would just try my hardest not to move and not to cry. Just lay there motionless and silent. I just thought if I could manage to not attract any attention to myself, maybe they wouldn't do anything to me. What were they going to do to me? I don't know. But I just stayed there like that for hours. I would be under the covers, shaking and just trembling with my fists clenched, holding the bed covers in place like, that was some sort of protection. And I would just be there just sweating completely through my superhero pajamas. And of course, silently, tears would just roll down my cheeks. But the silhouette people who were there tormenting me every night, they were only the warm-up act. The evening's entertainment would climax with something that scared me even more than the people-shaped black silhouette things in my room. The one thing that frightened me more than them was the horseman. As soon as I heard the hoofbeats in the distance, I would be struck with a new electric fear, because I knew what was coming next. The hoofbeats of the approaching horse would build from a distant rumble to sounding, like a thunderous roar. They would just get louder and louder and louder and louder. And then, as the hoofbeats slowed to more of a clip-clopping gallop, I would see him. The headless white rider and his white horse. So, just like the black outline people, the horseman had no features, and neither did his horse really, but instead of being, the darkest of black, both the horseman and his horse were all white silhouettes. And in fact, they gave off light. They didn't exactly glow. I guess the best way to imagine it perfectly is thinking about the light that is reflected by a full moon. That's exactly what it was like. The horseman would ride down the hallway, stop at the end of the hall, which was right in front of my bedroom door, Then he would turn around on his horse and ride back to wherever he came from. The hoofbeats would get softer and softer. And then I would hear the hooves returning. He was coming back. And he did this over and over and over and over every night. Stopping in front of my door, turning his horse, riding away, and then coming back to do it all over again. I cannot even tell you the fear that I had when I would hear those hoofbeats in the distance. I would be thunderstruck with complete terror. I could not speak. I could not move. I was truly paralyzed with fear. But, by the way, for the record, I could actually move, and I did, like, coming up for air when he galloped away, and then diving back under the covers when I heard him returning. I would leave this, like a quarter or dime size hole in the blanket so I could just breathe through there, and then put my eye up to it so I could see what was happening. But I learned very quickly that the only thing more frightening than watching the horseman was to not be able to see what he was doing. So I would always have my eye to the little hole in the blanket when I heard those hoofbeats get real close. Anyway, I want to make it clear that, I was diving under my blanket and coming up for air and all that, because this was not sleep paralysis. This was not some illusion, some hallucination caused by some physiological thing. Well, anyway, eventually, as each night of complete terror came to an end, the black silhouettes would wander back from wherever they were and walk back into the walls, and the horseman would come down the end of the hall, complete one more ride up the hall, gallop away, and that would be it. It was finally all over. I could breathe again. I could come up from air, and I could eventually sleep until the next night. The next night would bring this collection of monsters, spirits, beings back for an encore performance. And that's the way it was. Night after night, month after month. From probably, I'm just guessing, but midnight to 3 a.m. or something, I would not only be awake, but I would be getting completely traumatized. I was getting such very little sleep. I was constantly exhausted. I'd fall asleep while I was eating breakfast, while I was watching cartoons, while I was taking a shower. All of that eventually led me to permanent, severe sleep disorders that I still have to this day. Now, my parents were and are fantastic people. And one day, when I finally got the courage to tell them what was going on, they did what 99.9% of any good parent would do. I mean, think about it. Your kid comes to you and says all this stuff's happening. What do? I mean, me as a parent, I would say, oh, well, you're having a nightmare. That's what they did. They tried to help by telling me the shadow people, the horsemen, all that, and that was just my imagination. It's a nightmare. They can't hurt you. And yeah, that does seem like the right thing to do. I would probably do that as a parent. You try to comfort your child. It's all a dream. You're all right. You'll be fine. We're here to protect you, all that. But from the kid's point of view, you're being terrorized nightly. And when you go to the only people in the world who can possibly protect you from it, they don't believe you. In fact, they may be saying comforting words, but what I was hearing as a kid is, it's your brain. You are crazy if you believe that you saw that. We don't believe you. Anyway, the end result of all that, you know that now you are most definitely completely on your own. You know that nobody is ever going to come save you. You know that you just have to endure this. Endure this torture, this panic, this terror, night after night. And you just pray to God they don't kill you or drag you through a portal to hell or something, you know? And yeah, hindsight's 20/20, but you just think that's the way life is. This is just gonna keep happening forever. And you know, there were little things that would change, but basically 99% of the time, every night would be exactly that, exactly as I just described. That being said, there was one major exception. One giant event that changed all of this. And I don't know, take me some time to tell you about that, and I do need to go to sleep, so maybe I'll cover that in my next recording for you. But when I tell you what's been going on currently, all of this will make sense. And I know you can hear all the traffic noises and all that in the background. I'll try to dig up my fancy microphone to finish up this story over the next couple of days or something. But that's it for now. Again, Friday, April 2nd, 2021.
You've been listening to A Shock in the Dark, an audio journal of a haunting. For a free subscription to this series, push the subscribe button. To get an alert when the next episode posts, push the bell notification symbol. Post your questions or comments to the narrator in the comment section below. To contribute your recorded or personal story for this series, send it in an email to aSHOCKintheDARK@gmail.com. Until next time, as our narrator says, good night, whoever you are.